today we're gonna be doing something different. We're gonna be doing something new. I'm excited. We're gonna be doing a live review of Tenet, Christopher Nolan's new movie. I had the chance to go see it actually last night, so yeah, it is fresh on my brain. It is fresh on my brain, and I am incredibly excited to talk about it. But you know, before we talk about the movie, obviously I want to get some disclaimers out of the way about the actual going to a theater to go see it. So I live in North Carolina. North Carolina is not open right now to watch movies. So me and my friend Bernie, who I haven't seen in, I think it was probably close to a year or something like that since my other friend's wedding, but we hadn't seen each other in a really long time, and so we ended up scheduling out, okay, we're gonna go see the movie and we're gonna go see it in South Carolina. So, you know, it's not too far of a drive for us, you know, 20-45 minutes or something around that range between the both of us. And so we're like, all right, we're gonna do it, we're gonna get tickets, we're gonna go see the movie. And you know, obviously the health crisis is going on with the coronavirus, but I've got to say, this is probably one of the best experiences I ever had going to the theater, because oh my god, I have never seen a theater that spotless. We went to the one called it was the Redstone 14 in South Carolina. Oh my gosh, it was spotless. It was spotless. I didn't have a single complaint. They kept the social distancing guidelines. You had some people who were trying to act up and not wear masks. They were immediately had to go put on a mask, get kicked out. I don't know if it was complimentary mask or something like that, or they had to pay for it, something like that. But there was like a couple who were trying to go like, yeah, I'm not gonna wear a mask, and they're like, we're not having it. It's mandatory, baby. So I was like, okay, I like that. You know, mandatory to wear that mask. You disgusting people who don't want to wear them in public. So, but beyond that, man, there wasn't a hitch. There was concessions lines, but everything was marked up, you know, the 6 feet and all that stuff. But even in general, people still kept a much greater overall distance. For concessions, everything had to be passed to you from behind the counter and all that. So yeah, that overall part of the experience was really nice. And it was the bathrooms, oh my god, they were spotless. I mean, I'm not even talking like the, you know, when someone's walking with wet hands and the droplets are on the ground. I didn't even see those. Like, it was spotless in those restrooms. It was fantastic. I was like, oh my gosh, if movie theaters were looking like this, if treating things like this all the time, you know, they would have been doing, some theaters would have been doing better beforehand. But, so that was my experience with that, right? And that was my experience with that part of the theater presentation. Then there was the actual seats. So I was a little frustrated, a little flustered, because my homie Bernie and I, we like to see things on the big screen. You know what I mean? We like the best experience possible. We wanted to see it in IMAX. All right, we were ready to pay our $25, whatever BS it was gonna be, you know, to see this movie in IMAX. We're ready. It's a Christopher Nolan movie. You got to do it. They didn't have it. They only had 2 different versions showing. They had a PDX, and then they had a, it's just regular. Now, so we saw it in PDX. PDX is premium digital. I think it's the premium digital experience is how they do it. Hold on, let me check chat. Let me double check that. Let me pull up the Carfax on the PDX movies. On what PDX movies? So, what does PDX movie stand for? Premium Digital Experience. When you see a movie in any of these types of auditorium, regular blah, 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 regular 2D or 3D, you will be experiencing a presentation that will blow you away in comparison. This is Regal's Cinema's propaganda stuff of what PDX is. But what is PDX? PDX is a premium digital experience. And it essentially means it's movie format. Hold on. Okay, here, the part about the format it actually is. So, it's a large format with Dolby Atmos digital sound technology, Barco 4K laser projection, in both 2D and 3D, and a wall-to-wall and oversized screen. A stadium theater complex with more than 2300. That's talking about a specific theater, but you get the gist of it, where it is super crispy digital projectors along with digital audio. And you know, there's always the whole debate about whether or not filming on film or filming on digital is better, and which one it's better to project with. I think it's more cost efficient to do digital as compared to having, you know, celluloid film or film in general going through and running through a projector. But holy crap. And I'm normally a stickler when it comes to celluloid film and just how, like, you just can't match that feeling and that warmth and that grain, that pure cinema vibe. Like even with Knives Out, which is ironically the last movie I saw in theaters. That film was shot on digital, but they did a lot of after image processing to make it look like it was shot on film, like adding certain grain textures and the shadows and all that sort of stuff. But still, it felt like an imitation, right? It felt like an imitation. But dude, this PDX theater was nice. Oh my God, this PDX theater was, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I had a great time. I mean, the sound was like one of the number one things. I was like, oh my God, this sound is crispy. It's crispy. And the visuals were fantastic. But the way this played into dealing with, you know, the public health of being in the actual theater with it was that this auditorium was massive. I mean, it was massive. I mean, I'm very bad at ballparking numbers when it comes to like groups and stuff like that. I mean, it had to have been like maybe 200, 300 seater or more. Hold on. I just know it was massive. It was massive, and it wasn't even full to capacity. But because the theater was so massive, we had probably around 60, I'd say like 60 or so people on our showing. And even still, there was so much space. There was so much social distancing going on. Like, there's no worry about like, okay, get a little close and he's got a little bit of a cough back there. None of that, man. None of that. It was all spacious. It was all smooth. And then, on top of that, the theater etiquette. It was beautiful. Not a cell phone in sight. Not a buzz, not a nothing up, none of that. It was smooth. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It was smooth. You know what I mean? It was smooth. It was just great, man. It was absolutely great. Well, let's talk about the actual movie. All right, we've spent enough time of me telling you, you know, look, I was safe, kept my distance. Even me and my friend who haven't seen each other, we kept our distance. You know, we did the weenus touch, you know, bumping elbows. That's what we did. You know, it was safe, it was beautiful. It felt like home. It really felt like home being back in cinemas. In what better way to usher myself back into the movies than with the Christopher Nolan film? And let me tell you. Tenet was fantastic. All right, I'm not gonna bury the lead. I loved it. I had a really good time. Look, the Christopher Nolan is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. I mean, his film The Prestige is the reason why I want to be a filmmaker. It's the reason that I am pursuing filmmaking. It's the reason, you know. And every single time he puts out a movie, it's always an experience. Whether or not I do or don't like it, you know, it's always an experience. You know, prime example of that, you know, being Dunkirk. I didn't like Dunkirk. You know, it's just I needed characters. It's hard for me to connect and all this sort of stuff. But it was still, regardless, an experience, a well-crafted experience that I just emotionally couldn't attach myself to, right? But regardless, still, Tenet is just an absolute jaw-dropping experience, with a couple of major flaws that kind of really stick out like a sore thumb. And but beyond that, I still think that this is a great film. Is it Tenet? The question always comes up: is it Christopher Nolan's best film? No, it's not. Me personally, it's not his best film by a long shot. You know, I even think like Inception is better, even when you talk about a complicated subject matter like this one, right? But I feel like a big reason that a lot of people are going to be disappointed when they go see this movie is because the marketing is a little bit deceiving. Just a little bit. It kind of hints at, you know, this kind of otherworldly nature of the time travel and all that sort of stuff, of it being like this big element, and it's kind of like this big sci-fi sort of battle. It's not. To me, this is Christopher Nolan's James Bond. I truly think out of everything that Christopher Nolan's ever made, that this has the most potential to produce a bunch of sequels, and very interesting and diverse sequels that can be interrelated and all that sort of stuff, or not even related to the main cast that we've seen just now. But I think of all of his worlds that he's created, this one is just so ripe with possibility, and it truly felt like this is Christopher Nolan's James Bond. Because oftentimes we look at a filmmaker like Christopher Nolan, and we're like, oh, what if he did this and what if he did that? But what if he worked on James Bond? What if he did this superhero movie? All that sort of stuff. But I truly think that Tenet feels like this kind of culmination of everything elements he's been working with in all of his movies, where there's the complicated, world building of something like Inception, the practical effects of Interstellar, and the working with time very heavily, like The Prestige and Memento. It feels like he took everything that he's been gathering together to make his own spy movie, right? And I think it works. I truly think it works in that regard, and it works as a spy movie. But going in, I didn't realize I was watching a spy movie because of the marketing campaign. There's a lot of, we're just chasing after one target. We have a singular goal in mind. We got to talk to this person and that person, and espionage and all that sort of stuff. It's very espionage heavy, and politically, not really overtly like politically heavy, like geographically, not like, actual party, Republican, Democrat, politically heavy. But it spends a lot of time doing all of that, and because of that, you end up getting that kind of thing going on. Ryder the Zombie, thank you for the follow. I really appreciate it. But you end up kind of getting that kind of clash going on in that regard, right? What Christopher Nolan is trying to put on screen, and then what was like kind of marketed in the marketing advertisements, right? But I still think this film that we got is really strong, and it's really engaging. But now breaking it down though, this film's got some issues. But I want to get those out of the way before I talk more about the things I like, because I think these issues are important. So this started with Inception. All right, it started with Inception. There was a couple of moments where you're watching the movies and you're like, okay, the music's a little loud. It's kind of hard for me to hear what's going on. And then Interstellar came out, and there's just blatantly moments where the sound design and the score are just so blaringly loud. You're like, I can't hear what's going on. I really need subtitles. I'd say for Tenet, I was able to hear about 70% of the dialogue. That's a lot of missed dialogue. I want you to let that sink in. Out of a 2.5 hour film, I heard about 70% of it. I felt that during a couple. Yeah, it feels like with this film, I don't know who Christopher Nolan's sound designer is for his movies, but I think they should be fired. I really do, because the film blatantly goes out of its way to make things harder to hear, and I think it's for the fact that they're trying to, amplify the situation, like, oh, the intensity is growing, we're cross-cutting between all these different scenarios, like, oh my gosh, can you believe what's happening on screen right now? but you just can't hear it. You're like, hey, I can't believe it, but I also can't hear what's going on. Like, one of the most frustrating things about it is a lot of characters end up wearing masks for story-related purposes. Throughout the whole entire film, there's characters wearing masks. You can't hear a word that they're saying. And a big problem of that is people will reveal massive bits of information, world building, dialogue, all that sort of stuff. Massive bits of information will be muffled like, oh, the real answer I'm looking for. And you wouldn't even know what they just said, but they'll say something like, oh yeah, the truth behind all of this is blankety blankety blank. You can't trust blankety blankety blank. Like the whole entire, I think it was like the opening, it's about the opening 10 minutes are incoherent audio wise. It was really, it was really jarring, and I did not expect that. So that is like my number one glaring issue with the movie is the sound mixing, which is something I didn't expect to talk about this, but literally I went on Reddit, I looked up other movie reviews. I'm not the only person who had this issue, because I was talking to my friend Bernie after we got out the film, and I was like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to judge it too harshly. Maybe it's my fault, maybe it's our fault. We tried out this new theater, and we also tried out the new PDX format, so, maybe it just didn't quite mesh between us, or maybe the audio just wasn't balanced in the theater. No, it's just the movie itself. And it's a big issue when it feels like you have to watch the movie with subtitles in order to understand what's going on. So that was a gripe I had with it, and I just wish Christopher Nolan had somebody come into the editing booth with him and be like, no, what are you just saying? What? I can't. No, I didn't hear it. I can't hear it. I can't hear what they're saying. Like, I feel like he just needs somebody to come in and say that and be okay. It'd be perfectly fine. And then other things I didn't really like. Story gets a little too convoluted in the beginning. The movie moves at it's 2.5 hours. Doesn't feel like it though. It feels like an hour 50 maybe. It feels like 2 hours maybe, because it is moving at a breakneck pace at all times, and the first hour of the movie does not care about your feelings. The first half of the film does not care about how you feel. It doesn't care about explaining things to you. It's just like, look, you just gotta keep up and you just gotta watch the movie. Don't worry about it. Enjoy what you're watching. And then like around halfway through the film, you start getting explanations more and more about what you actually witnessed, and it recontextualizes the whole movie. But it forces you to well, if you want to, it doesn't really force you, but if you want to, it's forcing you to have to watch the film at least 2 times. I'm probably gonna see it 2 or 3 times total in theaters before it's all said and done. But my God, they really, it really forces you to have to go through a couple of rewatches, because I'm sitting there watching the film and I'm like, man, they are going out of their way not to explain things. I can't hear 30% of the dialogue, and then halfway through they're like, hey, this is what happened. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I probably would have caught more hints maybe if I could hear more of the film. So that was my second gripe with the film. Just, it's too purposefully opaque with a lot of its character relationships in order to build up suspense and ambiguity about people's relations and who their allegiances lie to, and it just makes it even more confusing. Because to be honest, the time traveling aspect or the inversion aspect of the plot, that's actually pretty much the easiest part to understand. It's all the geopolitics and the future politics, how's that play with the past and all that sort of stuff. That's the stuff where things really start to get confusing, and you're just sitting there like, what? So, yeah, it can be a little bit much in the beginning. It can be a little bit much. But I can't really think quite else of too many other gripes, like real issues I had with the film. I'd say the third thing that kind of bothered me would probably be that just a lot of the characters are very empty boilerplate Christopher Nolan characters. I mean, heck, the main character, he's just called protagonist, and you're relying so heavily on the charisma of the actors in order to carry the characters, but they're not, I don't know, they just feel more like, it feels like I'm watching a really great movie with action figures than characters, right? Where all these things are capable of doing all these really cool things, and they're engaging to watch and entertaining to play with and all that sort of stuff, and they put on a great show, but there's no too much depth to most of them, other than like maybe Kenneth Branagh, and then as the film goes on, there's more layers to Neil or Robert Pattinson's characters. You know, his character opens up a lot more in a little bit of his backstory towards the end and gives you more emotion. But like, the world is so interesting and the performances are interesting, but the actual writing behind them is not, it's not interesting. And so while you're sitting there in the third act and all this crazy bombastic stuff is going on, you just kind of feel a little empty inside, because you're like, I know what's at stake, I know who I'm rooting for, I just don't know if emotionally I care about them too much. The only one that you end up really emotionally fully investing in is the character of Kat, played by Elizabeth Debicki. I think that's her to pronounce her last name. One of the two. But she's kind of like the emotional through line, but that's a lot to put on one character, and not something like, you know, your protagonist or protagonist, and just giving them a little bit more emotional depth. And not even talking about, you know, like, this is where I grew up, and this is my family, this is my upbringing, and that. Like, no, just give me a little more sauce. You know, give me a little bit more sauce on who these characters are. Probably see it at some point. I think I've only seen 2 Nolan films, Interstellar and Inception. His name is the protagonist. Yes, the literal name of the main character is the protagonist. That's the type of emotional depth that we're dealing with these characters. But I mean, John David Washington does give a really good performance, though. Well, yeah, I still think, yeah, this film is definitely worth watching, and that's when we get into our positives. Despite all the gripes I had, you know, it feels like the characters are kind of a little soulless, a little empty, right? The pacing is all, it's breakneck and does not care about people on their first viewing. Just gets a little convoluted, a little complex, and not in a good way. And like, hey, you could write this better and it makes more sense. And then lastly, everything I said before. I'm trying to remember what my first point was, but you know what I mean. But with all that being said and done, I still think that this film is definitely worth seeing, because it's still an engaging spectacle at the end of the day. Christopher Nolan still has that talent of, no matter what he does, he still ignites your imagination, right? Like, you go in there and you sit there and you just, there's very few filmmakers where you're sitting back and you're like, how'd they do that? Because you know he doesn't use CGI that much, so you're sitting there like, yeah, but how did he do that though? Because when you're watching just action sequences go by, and you have a car chase going on, and one car is moving backwards in time, the other one's moving forwards, or you have fight sequences where people are moving backwards in time and forwards in time, but whether you play it backwards and forwards, the choreography makes sense momentum wise of the body both ways. It's mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And it's such an engaging watch as a spy thriller, even though it's not properly what it's marketed as. It is a really, really good spy thriller. It is just visually so captivating, with a genuinely just creative premise, and the way that they use time and this concept of inversion, where certain items and people can go backwards in time. It's incredible. It is absolutely incredible. It is just, no matter what, Christopher Nolan always solidifies why he is the best, or if not, you know, if not the best, one of the best filmmakers working right now. Because it's just, everything he does is just so captivating, and the way he puts everything together is jaw-dropping. I was reclined, you know, I was in the theater, we had the reclining seats, so, you know, I'm perched up like this, man, I'm feeling comfy. Yeah, I'm feeling comfy. But like, as the movie keeps going, I start moving up more and more in my seat, and then by the end of the movie, I'm just, invested. Oh, I'm invested. It's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, you know, the action sequences, they're incredible. It's shot beautifully. It's everything you expect from a Christopher Nolan movie. It's why I end up spending a little bit more time on the negatives than I do on the positives, because everything else about the film is just so solid. It's just like, bro, you're locked in. Like, you are absolutely locked in the film that's been created. And that's why the negatives that stick out, yeah, they stick out a little bit, but it's not a crazy amount. And it's even like, even if I were to give this film a rating, which I've kind of gotten back from, because I feel like the more you start giving out ratings, the more people focus less on the actual content of what you're saying. Even if I were to give it a rating, I'd still give it like an 8.5 upon my first viewing. But that's the thing, this is another one of Christopher Nolan's films where you can dissect it, right, over multiple watches. Same thing I have with The Prestige. I watch The Prestige every single time, about twice a year, well, at least minimum twice a year, right? And every single time I end up watching this movie, I always pick up these little details about character development. Maybe it's an item somebody wears, something that adds to the story every single time. And I feel like this is a film that, upon multiple rewatches, there's going to be so many details that you end up seeing in this movie that you're like, oh, this story is written tightly. I don't think the dialogue is written that well, which is something I forgot to mention, but the overall structure of the story is written tight. Because even though when you're watching that first half of the movie for the first time, you're not gonna know what's going on at all whatsoever. But by the time you reach the second half, you know everything that the story has to offer, and then you go in for multiple rewatches, you realize even though certain sequences or scenes didn't look like they related too much to what was going on, oh, they did. yeah, they did, and it is neatly written together, because oftentimes what you have with a lot of time travel movies, you can poke these little holes about like, well, this event doesn't add up with this, and if you follow the red thread, it doesn't lead to the target. Blah, blah, blah. People will do that, right? People will do that. But this is one of those films where you could try to poke those little holes in it. It's not really gonna work. It's not really gonna work. It's just written so tightly. Everything is wound tightly together. But with that being said, you know, wrapping up my thoughts on this film, I think it's great. You know, I think it's great. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It felt so good to be back in the movie theaters again, right? It's nice. It was safe. It was clean. Thank God. But it's just something about the magic of a Christopher Nolan movie right there on that big screen, staring you down in the face. You know what I mean? Looking to give you a good time. I just don't think you can beat that. It's absolutely fantastic. So it's a great way to usher yourself back into the theaters if you're thinking about it. You know, obviously be safe about whatever decision you're making. Call your theater ahead of time. Figure out what their safety protocols are. Make sure that you're actually going to a theater that, you know, that cares and they're doing their job properly. Commend them if they are, you know. But the film is worth it. It's it is so worth it. And I think upon spoiler reviews and all that sort of stuff and discussions, this is going to be a fun film to talk about. And to get people's thoughts on and see what they caught on to early on and come up with these little theories and all this sort of stuff. I think it's going to be nice. I think it's going to be real nice. But overall, I had a great